now coming round to form up on the grid, and the times yesterday were sensational.
Indeed they were. It was probably the most sensational final qualifying session we've ever seen. As we've got a fire in the pits. Moffat, no, he simply warmed it up. That's all it is. He's got the car red hot round the front, brakes nice and hot. No, he's boiling. Maybe it's not worked for him.
The pole position holder might just have outsmarted himself.
Times yesterday, finally at the last session of practice, with Peter Brock and Dick Johnson not able to find an answer, Allan Moffat claimed pole position yesterday with a time of 58.23 seconds.
And remember, at this circuit 2 years ago was the only time Allan Moffat's blown an engine, as he was tucked in behind Kevin Bartlett and it blew.
Look at the times. Peter Brock beside him, 58.54. On the second row of the grid, right behind Moffat, and that's significant when you consider the start of the race with Johnson right behind Moffat. 58.58 seconds. Alongside him on the second row of the grid, George Fury in the Nissan Turbo, 58.63 seconds. There's Fury hidden behind Brock. Then on the third row, and watch Jim Richards as well, 58.73, 30 seconds remaining. Besides Jim Richards is Allan Grice in the Holden Commodore, 58.76. Then on the fourth row of the grid, Warren Cullen, 59.03. Beside him, the local driver, David Parsons, 59.43. The next row, Peter McLeod with Stephen Harrington. Beside him, then comes Jim Carter and Murray Carter.
Every possible mix of engine gets underway, and Moffat last to lead. Fury doesn't move. Parsons is trying to find a way round him. And so it is Moffat from Brock trying to get round him, and he goes. And Johnson. And Moffat, I think, has troubles. Johnson's third, Grice is fourth, Richards is fifth, McLeod sixth, and Harrington seventh. Fury did not move. What dreadful bad luck for George Fury. Qualified fourth, 58.63. Now,
Moffat has stopped. Moffat has stopped out of the slow corner. There's Fury stopped at the start-finish line, and Moffat has got only one corner further on.
So it is Brock, Johnson, Grice, Richards, McLeod, Harrington.
There's Moffat's car.
Sorry, not Harrington.
Already with his safety helmet off.
It's Warren Cullen, then Harrington.
The leaders, Peter Brock, Dick Johnson.
Then Keogh, then Harris, then Murray Carter, then Graham Lusty. Parsons badly held up at the start. And number 7, Adrian Martin, a local driver in a road-going Falcon. Well, Brock couldn't have asked for things to go better, except that he really had to fight to get to the first corner first. But having done that, boy, is he capitalising on it. Peter Brock leads Johnson by 1.7 seconds. Bit of a trail of smoke from the back of Peter Brock's. No, I think it might have been something on the track. And Johnson in second place has a 1 second advantage over Allan Grice, who has very little in front of Jim Richards.
This really is disastrous for the Nissan and Mazda teams. The series this year, it looks like being so tight that to lose points now really is disastrous for them.
The two cars that suit the track best too. Allan Moffat's car that brakes so well and doesn't overheat its tyres.
The car went straight ahead there.
Two of the traditional problems on this track. And Fury's car as well. Well, George Fury, twice Australian Rally champion, will be so disappointed. Jim Keogh's the man that's gone off at the end of the straight. Brock out to 2.5 seconds over Johnson, whose advantage over Grice in third place is 1.4, so it's going out as well. And then it's still Richards, Peter McLeod, Warren Cullen, Steve Harrington. Big gap back then to Andrew Harris, Murray Carter and Parsons. Parsons will be one to watch moving forward from a bad start.
Well, in fact, as we saw, Parsons was held up right behind George Fury, had to wend his way through on the right-hand side of Fury's car.
2.6. Johnson from Grice, 2.2. But then, covering Grice, back to Steve Harrington, and there are 5 cars in the bunch. Not very much time at all. 2.7 seconds cover. You see them here from John Grice, 2.7 seconds to Richards, McLeod, then Cullen and Harrington. And a 58.9 for Brock. And on his 5th lap. George Fury, for him not to have moved on the line, he must have broken something in the drive line. As you see Peter McLeod looking for a run through on Jim Richards. But Fury must surely have broken something in the drive line, either transmission or a drive shaft. And Moffat, we saw him with engine overheating problems from trying to get the engine warm by muffling the car before the start. 3.1 Brock to Johnson. And then this good scrap, Grice, Richards, McLeod, Cullen and Harrington. Sandown they finish, Peter Brock, Dick Johnson, Allan Moffat, Richards, Fury, Cullen, Rusty French, who's not here today, and Jim Keogh. Peter Brock will start. Allan Grice having his last drive of this car, unless he comes up with some money or some backing fairly shortly, because SAAS steering wheels have backed him for these 2 rounds, but probably will not be at Wanneroo. Grice, the real stirrer in last year's championship, and about to stir.
There was Brian Bolwell in his escort, and he now gets out of the way and waves everyone through.
And there you see the results from Sandown, back to 8th place, and therefore the point scores that they hold at the moment. 7 rounds in the championship, 6 to come.
And you can see that Allan Moffat and George Fury will all obviously drop right back through the field. Peter McLeod is really looking for a way through Richards, and Richards is making that BMW twice as wide as it really is.
McLeod, the man who got no points at Sandown, or one of 2 that crashed. No fault of McLeod's, as he was charged up the tail by Andrew Harris.
So hard, in fact, that his seat mountings broke and left him flying around. There's Allan Moffat, the long walk back to the pits for the current Australian touring car champion.
Another 58.9 for Brock. Allan Moffat has spread his Australian touring car championships over 10 years, winning his first in 1973 and then his 4th in 82, taking them 2 on the trot in 76 and 77.
And Drew Moffat is with Allan Moffat.
Well, you took the stone guard out for the warm-ups, and you were boiling when you came back. Is that the same problem that took you out of the race?
Yes.
Have you done that before, take out a stone guard?
Well, I suspect an electrical fault. The warning light, normally the overheating warning light goes off at 100 degrees, and it didn't go off. And the first I noticed that I was running hot was when I came around just to virtually stop for the start of the race.
So, is it a mistake to take out that stone guard? Was it a mistake to take it with you?
Well, it's important to get the engine warmed up, but I was moving fairly quickly to get it in peak condition, and it's kind of a circuit. Not always looking at the gauges, and I was keyed up for the start of the race. It's the first time we've been on pole for a long time, and it was
disappointing start for you as defending champion.
Unfortunately, it gives the Holden dealer team a break even. They can go to Le Mans, and I've had my DNF through the season, so let's hope we don't have another one.
And Allan Moffat makes that point very well, that of course Peter Brock will miss 1, maybe 2 rounds of the Australian Touring Car title. So in terms of points, it still remains wide open. Incidentally, Moffat's last pole position was at Lakeside in the final round of the Australian Touring Car Championship last year. He, last year, claimed 3 pole positions in the Australian Touring Car Championship to Peter Brock and Alan Grice both on 2. Peter McLeod in the slick 50 Mazda RX-7, like Allan Moffat, using the new Avon racing tyres, while Peter Brock has remained with his steadfastly with his Dunlop tyre arrangements.
Brock's lead 3.8 seconds, and he is on lap 10, coming up to quarter distance. Grice, and when you see him appear, look at Richards on him in the BMW. There he is, and then Peter McLeod. This is Grice and Richards, end of the straight. Then Peter McLeod, then Steve Harrington, Warren Cullen, the lap Carniello, and Parsons. We just saw him up the top there in the yellow car as Richards attacks Grice. The BMW that was 4th at Sandown, and he might be cognizant of what happened between Grice and Allan Moffat here last year, where Moffat ended up out in the grass. Grice still stoutly says that they didn't touch as Grice goes out wide.
Richards has been taking Rob Phillis lessons.
Good scrap behind Peter McLeod and Harrington, and Cullen hanging in there. There they are again.
Grice, of course, was the JPS BMW driver before he lost that drive and Jim Richards took it over. But I think it is probably reasonable to say that Grice does not hold too much love for the team, which is now challenging him for 3rd position. He is, regardless of who's behind him, the hardest man in Australia to pass. Braking duel, Holden, Commodore, BMW. Jim Richards on the outside, and there's no joy in being there, so he wisely tucks underneath.
And behind this pair, the 5 cars are separated by 3.3 seconds. Good dice. See further back too. Harrington's through on McLeod, done it well. And Warren Cullen now tails the lot of them. So Harrington's doing a good job there, young Steve.
22 years of age from Hobart now as McLeod comes down the inside on him. And now you'll see what a V8 does against a rotary-powered Mazda down the straight.
Have a look what McLeod's doing to the V8.
Unbelievable.
As Moffat's done down that same straight himself. Quite remarkable.
Security tap on the brakes then from Steve Harrington. He's obviously the first to suffer the braking problems.
Peter McLeod in the box seat, not quite in behind. If he'd been beside him, he was in the box seat. And catching this lot is Parsons.
And there goes Harrington off the track, and it only took the momentary slip. And McLeod was through, and Cullen was almost through.
Parsons is 5.63 seconds behind them with clear track and able to pick his lines.
There's Brock on the back straight. Dick Johnson still looming behind him. Alan Grice is in 3rd position. You can see him just at the top of the corner, the screen there.
Behind Grice, the order at 15 laps is Jim Richards, Peter McLeod, Steve Harrington, Warren Cullen now with his lights on, and David Parsons trying to make up for being boxed in behind Fury's broken down car at the start. But the race leader, the man who had such an easy run at Sandown, 14-second victory, which really surprised him. He got no challenge from Allan Moffat, whose Mazda was revved so hard and frothed its oil so much that it was swimming around in the cockpit. Dick Johnson's 4.5 seconds behind Brock, but a long way, some 8 seconds in front of Grice in third.
And Drew Morford has George Fury in the pits.
Yes, but also an early departure from the track by the looks of you.
Well, we've got a plane to catch, and I'm very disappointed. We all are, and I'm sorry particularly for the boys and Nissan that it's happened, but it's one of those things, you know. We've had a very, very fraught week this week, and it's ended up quite badly. So, but we'll be back next time, and we'll be back good.
What happened?
Well, as soon as I dropped the clutch on the starting line, I think we must have broken a diff in some way or another. The grid is very sticky here, and we had very good sticky tyres, and it just spelt disaster, I'm afraid.
Tyres might have been too good.
Oh, well, in this case, yes.
Bad luck, George. Next round.
Thanks very much, Drew.
Very bad luck for Fury, who'd been doing 58.8s in early qualifying, dropped out to over 59s in his race car, then yesterday swapped to his 1980 car, the first Bluebird built, and got that cracking to a 58.63. That was the car that was damaged in a collision with Grice at Amaroo, so it's got a new back end on it, and then it was damaged with Gary Scott driving, it's got a new front end on it. So it's done a lot of work. Still, though, a very taut car, apparently, in terms of its ability in its handling and the way it can be set up. But the man for whom the Touring Car Championship is falling into place at the moment, Peter Brock, but who will miss 2 rounds, which means he'll drop points from 1.
Brock passes one of his old team cars, in fact, Graham Lusty, in the 25 car of 2 years ago. Graham and his brother John doing the entire Australian Touring Car Championship this year, sharing the drive about.
And we've lost from 4th place behind Alan Grice. Jim Richards in the BMW number 31 has gone into the pits. So that now makes the race order Peter Brock from Dick Johnson 2nd. 3rd place still Grice. 4th place, some 6 or more seconds in arrears, is Peter McLeod. 5th, Steve Harrington, this dice, and 6th place, Warren Cullen. 7th place, David Parsons. So 5th and 6th, the battle here that we're looking at, with McLeod in the foreground in 4th, and Parsons in the background in 7th. Cullen, go down deeper and you've got him.
Cullen built this car for last year's Castrol 400 and for the James Hardy 1000. Found new sponsorship this year from K-Mart with Andrew Harris, his co-driver and partner in the team. Harris in the ex-Peter Brock car, which won last year's James Hardy 1000. And certainly the new sponsors getting stuck right into it. They're very well represented here at the circuit today. Indeed, they've set up a supermarket in the pits and are actually selling oils and accessories. Every little bit helps, I guess.
Half race distance. With Brock coming up to lap Harris. The 37-year-old Melbourne driver reveling in being able to determine his own pace and pick his own lines, not having to hold out a motor car with different abilities around this track, which he thought would have been the case with Allan Moffat. His team manager Larry Perkins said, frankly, I think Moffat can lap faster for 40 laps than we can. Is Dick Johnson gone through with now a massive lead over Allan Grice. Bad luck for Jim Richards in the BMW. Dick Johnson only the 3rd outing in his newly built Falcon. Debuted at Sandown, ran it at Amaru last weekend. Still with some sorting to do. He said the spring rates and the dampers that they had on the old car just aren't suiting the new body quite as well, and they've just got to find the right combination.
Indeed, that will give him some tyre problems and also make him work a lot harder in the cockpit. No one doubts Dick's ability, but this car is going to start to go off as the race proceeds.
Peter Brock leads Johnson by 5.2 seconds.
Peter Brock, you noticed him on two wheels there through the pit left-hand corner. He's been doing that almost every lap and also in practice. I asked Larry Perkins yesterday whether they could do something to prevent it. He said, why bother? We go just as quick by doing it.
Has completed 24 laps on his 25th. He's only headed for a few hundred metres at the start and will again be very pleasantly surprised about the ease of what looks to be a Brock victory. Certainly the only thing likely to stop him, Dick Johnson haunting him about 5 seconds in arrears, so it keeps him fairly honest. But the only thing likely to really to stop him or to take the victory from him is mechanical trouble. It's Peter McLeod who slides the car fairly wildly there. You can see him let the tail go out. All that does is work the tyres a bit. Alan Moffat's lap of 58.23 really was quite sensational because he really did have to chuck that Mazda to the dirt edges in almost every corner, both on the apex and on the exits.
Brock thought that he might have actually been able to do a little bit better, but as he went out on his hot lap, the only lap when the tyres he was on were exactly right, George Fury got in the way down the back straight. Probably not, obviously not purposely. And Brock missed that lap by about half a second and finally just had to throw up his hands and say, well, today, Alan Moffat's got me.
Three-quarter race distance. And behind them with the BMW retired. Grice. We go back to Peter McLeod in 4th place. Warren Cullen, Steve Harrington takes us through to 6th. David Parsons is 7th still. Has only 10 laps to try and catch Harrington to improve a place. And the gap from Harrington to Parsons is 6 seconds. Peter McLeod heading a bunch of cars by not very much. Peter McLeod to Harrington with Cullen sandwiched between them. It's 2.3 seconds.
And Harrington again jammed right in Cullen's boot and looking for a way around and gets it.
Very, very easily, in fact. Seen Cullen a bit tentative before under brakes when he could have shoved his nose in. Perhaps he has a braking problem. He really did ease off there very early for the corner.
Watch them here. There was Harrington hitting his brakes halfway down the back straight. Harrington's got a braking problem because he's having to pump them on the way down into the corner. See how early they come on. That's Harrington. Now Cullen may be even in worse condition, but Harrington's certainly having a tentative feel of the brakes every time down the back straight just to make sure they'll be there when he needs them.
Very interesting to watch a lead driver like Brock, not only when they've got things right and they're picking their lines, but when they're offline, as Brock was then as he came onto pit straight, and he really still eased the car through. He was able to make a bad entry as he lapped the car still into a very smooth line that didn't work the car hard at all. He did it very nicely.
Interesting to compare budgets too. Brock, when he finishes this race this afternoon, will be rushing with the rest of us to the airport to catch the 5 o'clock commercial flight back to the mainland, while Graham Lusty behind him will amble back and hop in his twin-engine Cessna and fly back at his own leisure.
Other people will be driving their own trucks back to the ferry and going across with them.
And poor old Murray Carter, who last year suffered $3,500 worth of damage to his transporter when he brought it across here, will be towing back behind a utility so as to keep the transporter safe from damage. Brock onto two wheels again.
Brock completes lap 36. 4 remain and leads Johnson by 8.9 seconds. Johnson leads Grice in 3rd place by a large margin. In fact, you have to find a lot of words to find Allan Grice to come round to your timing point. It's well over 20 seconds now. Allan Grice in arrears to Johnson. In 3rd place, goes through 25.3 seconds, the gap from Johnson to Grice. To Peter McLeod, it's then about 8, and about 1.9 to Harrington.
And 2.5 again back to David Parsons. I'm sorry, to Warren Cullen, and then back to David Parsons.
Dick Johnson not in the same happy position as Peter Brock for next year, Group A regulations, because Brock's Holden Commodores still made in V8 versions. They, in fact, dropping the 4.2 litre V8 in the latest VK Commodore, not really yet seen on the road, the 6-window model, but Ford Falcons no longer come in V8s. And so there's only a fuel injection 4.2 litre 6. Grice is in 3rd place, we told you, about 26 seconds behind Johnson. 4th place behind him as Parsons goes into the pits. David Parsons pulls out of his chase, his 7th place. Very bad luck for him.
And while it's fair to say that this race has become somewhat processional rather, and
can we have a look at Parsons in the pits, please?
Thank goodness for the motorcycles, which really thrilled us this afternoon with their action. Please don't think this is the way the Australian Touring Car Championship will be for the rest of this year, because when we get to Wanneroo in 3 weeks' time, the fireworks will really be on between the Mazda of Allan Moffat and the Nissan Turbo of George Fury. Remember at Wanneroo last year, as Parsons we see now pulled back out of the pits and rejoin the race 1 lap down behind Grice. Remember last year at Wanneroo, it was Allan Moffat who really created controversy when he took on only half a fuel load and stopped halfway through the race last year, took on fuel load, then went on to win the event.
But then he created controversy down here, and he created controversy at Sandown.
He'll do it again. And yes, the last lap board is out, and Peter Brock, Peter Perfect, is on lap 40 of the 2nd round of the Australian Touring Car Championship at Symmons Plains at Launceston, Tasmania.
Come up to about 40 minutes running time for the 40 laps, the 96 kilometres of this 2nd round of the 25th Australian Touring Car Championship, a championship that's been won 11 times by Ford, 8 times by Holden, but only once by a Japanese car, Allan Moffat's Mazda RX-7 last year. Holden Monaro was the first local car to win the championship back in 1970.
Brock's won it 3 times. Bob Jane and Allan Moffat have won it 4 each. And Ian Gagan still holds the title with five wins in the Australian Touring Car Championship as Peter Brock takes the checkered flag to win round 2 of the 1984 title. Dick Johnson in the green Ford Falcon comes through in 2nd position.
Brock's race time, 39 minutes, 0.51 seconds, an average speed for the 96 kilometres and the 40 laps, 144.4 kilometres an hour, as we await Allan Grice to take 3rd place. nearly 30 seconds in arrears to Dick Johnson. David Parsons close to him, but a lap down through a brief pit stop, perhaps for fuel. Grice goes across the line. Fourth place then, not very far, 4.2 seconds behind is Peter McLeod. Fifth, Warren Cullen.
Sixth, Steve Harrington right on his tail again. And that gives Peter Brock 50 points in the title from Dick Johnson on 46. Allan Moffat remains on 20, Jim Richards remains on 17, George Fury remains on 15. Third place will therefore be shared in the title between Allan Moffat and Alan Grice.
Pete, you were sitting alongside Moffat on the grid and you saw him out of the business very early.
Yes, he turned hard right after the start line, which didn't surprise me. And I thought, well, I'm going to hang in here. I've got the big Aussie V8, I'll have a go. And about 100 yards before the corner, she exploded. The Mazda, something happened to it. Moffat just went poof and into the race. I noticed the Datsun parked there too, so it was surprising to see two front runners, two fancied runners out so early.
Well, even after the warm-up laps, you'd have looked across and seen steam pouring from Moffat's car. You'd have had a bit of a grin then?
Oh, it's very sad to see that, you know. It's like Collingwood being in front of about 10 goals at half-time in the grand final, you know. How good's this?
Well, it was a fairly comfortable drive for you.
Well, it was, but you have to maintain concentration, and Dick was keeping me extremely honest. I was looking at my lap times once I got about a 3.5 second gap, and Dick was maintaining that gap. In fact, if I worked very hard, I could maybe gain a 10th every now and then, which I wanted to get. I wanted to try and just sneak away from Dick because 3 seconds is not far enough. A couple of cars spin in front of you, you make a drive error, and all of a sudden it's down to a second and you've got a battle on your hands. So I was working hard.
If the defending champion Moffat is to be your main opposition, he's got a DNF now. You've got a round out while you're in Le Mans. Which round will you miss?
Two rounds, actually. I miss Lakeside and Surfers Paradise. So I'm one race disadvantage. I mean, we all drop one, but I've got to get a perfect score and hope that the results are up and down the scale and that the odd people get DNFs or fifths or sixths or something like that.
Well, you've got a perfect score so far, 2 out of 2.
Looking good so far. I should quit while I'm ahead, I suppose.
Yeah, well done, Pete.
Thanks,
Terrific. Well, Dick, all you could do, a bit like Sandown, was have a bit of a chase.
Yeah, mate, but we're just that much closer now, and the car felt good throughout the entire race. The right and rear tyre went off a little bit, but we're getting much closer to the mark, and full credit must go to Wayne and all the boys. They've put a top effort in this weekend, and they deserve a placing.
Well, you've had a really good start, 2 seconds in the first 2 rounds.
Well, it's better than poking the eye with a burnt stick, isn't it? And, you know, it's just due to the fact that, you know, I've got good sponsors and a good crew.
I mean, to look at the race, you would say, all right, fair gap between first and second, comfortable drive for you and for Peter, but you both really look as though you're going through the mill. Hard work?
Well, it's pretty hard work, and, you know, I tried pretty hard to stay with Peter, and we got screwed up a bit off the start because Allan Moffat's thing let everything go in front of us, and we had all stuff over the windscreen, but, you know, if we had been a bit closer to start with, you never know what might happen.
Okay, well, good luck in the rest of the series. Brocky's away for a couple, so that might give you a chance to overhaul him.
Well, I'd rather do it fair and square rather than have him away, so we'll see what happens in the next couple.
Good luck, Dick.
Thank you.